Hey, thought leaders. This is the personalbranding.com podcast, and I'm your host, Dillon Kivo. Join us to learn how to build a legacy, boost your reputation, and make a lasting impact. Let's dive in. Hey, this is Dillon, your host of the personalbranding.com podcast, and I'm glad you are here. Quick thing before we get going. So I run a company that helps founders write and launch books. Of course, we do PR and all that stuff too, but today we're focusing on the books. We help them become Amazon bestsellers typically, right? So when I tell you a book is the highest leverage authority asset you can build, you should know that I'm in that business, okay? I'm just going to tell you what I actually believe based on 10 years of doing this type of work, and you can take it or leave it. All right, so let's jump into it. So I want to talk about something today that most founders never seriously consider. And the few who consider it, they usually end up doing it wrong, which is just a shame because when it's done right, it can actually be one of the best things you can do for your business. And I'm talking about writing a book, not a LinkedIn post, not a podcast, not a Twitter thread, an actual book like this. This is the one that I wrote. So I'm talking about like an actual book with a spine and a cover and an ISBN number, right? Sitting on somebody's bookshelf. And I get it. Most founders, when they hear write a book, they kind of just dismiss it, right? And years ago, I used to do the same thing. They think it's kind of a vanity project, or they think it's going to, take them 2 years that they don't have, or nobody reads books anymore. Or this is the most common one that I hear. They think they don't really have anything to say that's worth a whole book, right? I'm going to push back on every single one of those. And then I'm going to tell you what a book actually does for a business when you do it right. Because look, I've watched it transform companies. I've watched founders go from, being one of many in their space to being the person pretty much the entire industry quotes now, right? The asset that did that work, the thing that flipped the switch was a book for them. If you don't know me, I'm Dillon Kivo. I wrote a book called The Authority Playbook, and it hit the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller list, which was awesome. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the good ones. And for years, I've been helping other founders do the same thing. So today, I want to make the case for why in 2026, a book is still the most valuable single piece of authority real estate a founder can own. So let's start with what a book actually does that other content does not do. So the thing that nobody tells you about content is most authority content, it's rented, right? You don't own your LinkedIn followers. You don't own your podcast listeners on Spotify, Apple, whatever. You don't own your YouTube subscribers. The platforms, they own it all, right? They own all the data, I should say. They can change the algorithm tomorrow and your reach can drop by 80% overnight. And anyone who's been doing organic content for more than 5 years have lived through this multiple times. I've watched founders build huge LinkedIn audiences over 3 to 4 years. They put in the work, they show up every day, and then LinkedIn changes how it surfaces content. And then their reach just collapses in a single, quarter, right? So all that work, all that consistency, gone. That's the deal you sign when your authority lives on someone else's real estate, right? Their platforms. They're still great. They're free. Still do it. But you're a tenant. A book is different. A book is owned. Once it exists, it exists. It sits on Amazon forever or all the different, book locations you could buy. It sits on bookshelves forever, right? It gets gifted. It gets quoted. It gets cited. It does not depend on an algorithm to keep working. Right? Well, there's books from over 100 years ago that we still read today. 5 years from now, somebody is going to discover your book, reach out to you because of something you wrote in the chat in any random chapter. That doesn't usually happen with LinkedIn posts, right? LinkedIn posts, they kind of have a shelf life, maybe 3, 4, 5 days, maybe a week or two, and then they're gone. They're gone in the sense of, newer posts will kind of surface and then submerge the older posts. A book has a shelf life of, it could be decades, right? So that's the first thing, permanence. A book is the only piece of content you'll ever make that compounds for probably the rest of your career. None of these are guarantees. This is kind of just general information about books, by the way. Okay, so the second thing is And this is a big one. A book changes the conversation buyers have about you before they even meet you, right? Think about how buyers research vendors, businesses right now. They Google your name, they look at your LinkedIn or social media, they check if you have a podcast, they poke around a little bit on your website, they form their own opinion before they even talk to you or your team. And here's something most founders don't fully appreciate. By the time a serious buyer gets on a call with you, they've already decided whether they're going to, they think you're worth their time or not, for the most part. Or some people don't even book calls because they don't even think that you're worth their time, but let's just say they do, right? The call is more like a confirmation. They are not coming in neutral. They're coming in with with an opinion they've already formed during the research phase. And that opinion either helps you or hurts you in that conversation. So now imagine that research path includes that, oh, wow, they wrote a book about the topic that your prospect is in. That changes the whole frame of the first conversation that you have with the prospect. You're not pitching them anymore. They're meeting the person who wrote that book they bought to learn about that space anyways. The power dynamic flips entirely. You're not asking for the deal. They're asking if you'll work with them. I've watched founders close deals at significantly larger contract sizes after their book came out with shorter sales cycles because the book did a lot of that hard selling, right? The book is kind of a salesperson that's working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and never asks for a commission. While you're sleeping, somebody on the other side of the country is reading your book, deciding that they need to hire you. There's a specific psychological shift that happens when somebody reads your book before talking to you. They feel like they already know you. They've spent, 5 or 6 hours with your ideas already. By the time they get on a call with you, you're not really like a stranger trying to sell them something. You're an author, right? Kind of like a celebrity, if you will, a figure in their space. And that dynamic is almost impossible to replicate with just any other form of content, right? And the third thing, and this one most founders really underestimate. A book forces you to actually figure out what you believe. Most founders have not done this. And I'm not throwing shade, right? They have a business, they have opinions, they have a vague sense of how things work in their industry, but they've never been forced to sit down and articulate in 50,000 words exactly what they believe in their space and why. Writing a book makes you do that. It's the hardest intellectual work most founders will ever do in their career. And the result is not just a book. The result is that you finally know with clarity what you stand for. Your sales conversations get sharper, your team meetings get sharper, your hiring gets sharper, your marketing gets better because you finally articulated the operating system that's been running in your head this whole entire time. I've had clients tell me that the book itself wasn't even the most valuable part of the process. The most valuable part was that by the end of writing it, they understood their own business in a way that they never had before. They've been running their own company for 10, 15 plus years and didn't really fully understand their own thinking until they had to put it on paper. That's a profound thing when you kind of sit with it, right? When you think about that. The act of writing the book changes the founder, not just the founder's market position. You come out the other side as a clear thinker, right? And let's face it, clarity is king with business, right? Okay, now let me hit the objections because I know what you're thinking right now. Dillon, I don't have time to write a book. Fair. Most founders don't. And that's why most founders who write books don't really do it alone. That's kind of the secret. They work with a team that helps them get their ideas out of their head and onto a page. Done well, look, it usually only takes about an hour per week of the founder's time over about 12 to 13 weeks. Not 2 years. We're talking 3 to 4 months. So the model where the founder sits alone in a cabin and writes a manuscript, yeah, that's a romantic idea. It doesn't fit how most founders actually operate. The realistic model is a structured process where the founder provides the thinking and the experience and a team handles the heavy lifting of turning those ideas into a manuscript. Another one is nobody reads books anymore, right? A lot of people say it, nobody reads books anymore. It's wrong. The data on this is better than most people think. Audiobooks especially have grown a lot over the last several years. Business books have a robust audience because of the people that buy them, of course, right? Executives, founders, decision makers. Those are exactly the people you're trying to reach. The buyer for the high ticket service is also the person who buys business books. And here's the thing, the audience for the kind of book a founder writes is not really for mass market, right? It's small, it's a smaller market, valuable, specific audience of operators who are trying to solve a problem that you happen to know how to solve. You don't need 1 million readers. You need the right 1,000 readers. That's a completely different bar. Another thing people say, or they think I should say, is I don't have anything worth a whole book. This one I'd really push back hard on. If you've been operating in your industry for more than 3-4 years and you can't fill a book with what you've learned, you haven't been paying attention to your own work. Every founder I've worked with, thought this at the start. Every single one of them. And every one of them ended up with more material that they can fit in just one book. The problem is never that founders don't have enough to say. The problem is the founders don't realize how much they know until somebody draws it out of them in a structured way. You're sitting on a decade of pattern recognition that nobody else in your space has, because nobody else has run your specific business like you have, and that is a book. That's what makes your book different from the hundreds of generic business books that come out every single month. The expertise is already in your head. The book is just the format that gets it out. Another thing that people say is books are vanity projects. Okay, that maybe it used to be true. It's definitely not true anymore. The founders treating books as vanity projects are the ones putting out generic motivational books with their face on the cover. And yes, I do have my face on the cover, but I've sold, I think, over 10,000 of these things. So the founders treating books as strategic assets are putting out books that solve a specific problem in a specific industry with a specific framework that they actually use. And they work. And the good thing too is you can write your book so it's evergreen, so it lives on for a very long time. The difference though is intent. A vanity book is written to make the founder feel important. A strategic book is written to be useful to a specific reader. The reader that can tell a difference within the first 10 pages. And so can the market. Okay, so what does the book actually need to work as a business asset? Let me give you 3 things. First, it needs to be about a problem your buyers are trying to solve. It's not about you. The book is not your memoir. It's not your origin story. You can include those things, but it's about solving a problem. It's a tool that helps your buyer think more clearly about a problem they have. So if you're a fractional CFO, your book is not My Journey from Accountant to Entrepreneur. It's how growth stage companies should think about cash flow, right? This is the single most common mistake I see founders make when they decide to write a book. They make it about themselves. Their buyers don't really care about the authors. It's kind of the truth. Their buyers care about themselves. The reader cares about the reader and their own problems. The book that works is the book that helps the buyer solve a problem they're already trying to solve. Your story can show up in service of that, but it can't be the main point. The second thing is it needs to be specific frameworks, specific case studies, specific numbers. Same principle that makes any content work makes books work as well. Generic books don't produce business outcomes. Specific books do. If your book could have been written by any other consultant in your space, it's not going to differentiate you. The whole point of you writing a book is to put your specific point of view on paper with the specific evidence that supports it. If you take the specifics out, what's left is just sounds like every other book in your category. It's generic. And that book doesn't move the needle for your business. I would say the third thing is your book needs to be promoted. And this is where most self-published founders, they just fail. They write a perfectly good book and then they do nothing to launch it. I mean, look, there's millions of books on Amazon, right? You don't just publish it on Amazon and pray and hope for the best. There's a whole strategy. I'm not going to get into the whole strategy on this podcast episode. This is a whole episode by itself. I'll just leave it at that. promoting the book is one of the most important parts. Yes, using all your social media platforms, but there's a lot of other strategies that you can use that our firm uses here at the agency. And a lot of it is going to mass market. It's not ads, but there's things like emails, specific email lists where you can blast out to, avid readers online, right? Coming up with a promotional marketing strategy for selling your book is extremely important. And that's actually the last point of hitting those bestseller lists. That's how you hit the bestseller list, is you sell a lot of books. I'm gonna kind of close out the episode here. I hope you would enjoy this episode. It's a little bit different than most of my other content, but thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, please reach out on Instagram at Dillon Kivo, K-I-V as in Victor O, and I'd love to answer any of your questions. I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless, and take care. Thanks for tuning in. I'd love to hear from all of you. Follow and connect with me on all of your favorite social media platforms at Dillon Kivo, Dillon Kiv as in Victor O. And until next time, keep building your brand and stay golden.